2023 is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, and to celebrate, I'm reviewing various Doctor Who media from a wide range of formats. Today is the final day of the anniversary celebrations, with the premiere of the third special, The Giggle. This episode sees the return of the Toymaker, a villain who, until now, has only been seen in one other television story, The Celestial Toymaker, starring William Hartnell as the first Doctor. So it's only right then that I should include at least one of his appearances in my 60th anniversary videos, because he is of course the one who started it all. And also I wanted to review a story that ties into this episode. That's the same reason that I reviewed the Doctor Who and the Star Beast comic strip and audio adaptation, because that episode, The Star Beast, was based on that original story. I couldn't do that with Wild Blue Yonder though, because we knew so little about it. But with this one, I knew if the Toymaker's in it, then I'm definitely reviewing the Celestial Toymaker. But the problem was, I couldn't decide how I was going to cover this story, because most of it is missing. Of its 4 episodes, only the last one, The Final Test, survives. I considered reviewing the whole story and talking about the telesnap reconstructions of the 3 missing ones. I considered reviewing just the final test on its own, somehow, and at one point I even thought about making a mini documentary about the final test and its history as an episode. I couldn't fix on an idea, and I was really struggling to decide, but then, this week, BBC Studios revealed the trailer for a home video release of the story, brought back to life with animation. So now that we have that to talk about, I may as well go with that. I'm just glad that they gave me enough notice instead of waiting until I'd already made whatever video I would have ended up making. This also means that one of my 60th anniversary videos gets to be about an upcoming release in the future, instead of all of them being about existing releases from the past, because I'm going to be focusing more on the actual home video release of the story rather than the story itself. So with that said, let's talk about the new home video release of The Celestial Toymaker. So this has 2 discs, and on the first disc is a reanimation of the complete serial in black and white. Even though the final test survives, it would be weird to only animate the majority of the story and not the whole thing, because if you're going to do 3 or 4 episodes, you may as well just go all the way and do all 4 episodes. Generally speaking, only the minority of incomplete stories tend to be animated when only the minority of the story is missing. Like The Invasion, for example, that's 8 episodes, and only 2 of those episodes are missing, so only 2 of them were animated. But when it's the majority of the story that's missing, the whole thing is animated, if you understand what I mean. And there are also the reconstructions of the 3 missing episodes. The press release they put out doesn't specify that they're telesnap reconstructions, but I'm going to assume that they are, because if the reconstructions of the 3 missing episodes are listed separately from the animation of all 4, then there's nothing else that I really think it could be. It also has a restored version of the final test, the original episode, so you will be able to still watch that on it. And it also has a new audio commentary. Although the press release specifies commentaries, I don't know who that might be. Most of the people involved in the making of the story are dead now, though. Peter Purvis, who played Stephen Taylor, is probably going to be one of the participants. And Brian Hodgson is still alive. He created the special sounds for the story, so he may be involved. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Toby Hadoke is brought in to moderate, because he knows so much about Doctor Who. He's such an expert on it, and he has experience with doing podcasts with Toby Hadoke's Who's Round. So I would imagine that he may be brought in, which is not uncommon for people to be brought in who weren't involved in the story but are Doctor Who experts and fans and know all about it. It's just a shame that it's taken this long for it to have some sort of release, so that then there could have been more people involved, but yeah. Then on disc 2, One of the special features is called Doctor Who Escape Room Team First Doctor. I don't really know what this is. I don't know if anyone knows what this is. There are 2 Doctor Who escape rooms. One is called Worlds Collide and the other is called A Dalek Awakens. Neither of them, as far as I know, have anything to do with the Celestial Toymaker. And the fact that it has a subtitle, Team First Doctor, means that there may be another Doctor Who escape room feature on another home video release. But honestly, this is the only feature on this release that I actually just do not care about at all. It seems like the sort of thing that was made as a promotional thing for the escape rooms. And they thought, well, we'll just release it on the next Doctor Who home video release, regardless of what the story is. It may be interesting to watch, but of all the things on here, this is the only thing that I'm not excited about. But that doesn't really matter, because it's still a nice bonus, I suppose. And then, on disc 2, the big thing is a reanimation of the complete serial, but in colour. So on disc 1, you get the black and white version, and on disc 2, you get the colour version. Now, the black and white version on disc 1 is on the same disc as the actual surviving episode. So, if you wanted to, you could watch the animations of the first 3 episodes and then watch the final test, the original episode, if you want to. That might not be as simple as it sounds though, and I'll get onto that soon. But the colour version, I know that the animations being in colour are controversial because that's not how the original programme is, but I do think of the colour versions as being just as valid as the black and white versions, because making the show in black and white wasn't an artistic choice, it was just the limitation that they had at the time. They would have made it in colour if they could have done. It wasn't that they chose to make it in black and white, it was just the only way they could make it. And also, the black and white animation is still there on disc 1, so if you're that puritanical about it, then you do still have those. And also, William Hartnell himself has said that he always wanted the show to be in colour. He said that he'd love to see it being made in colour one day, and of course he eventually got to be in it in colour in the 3 Doctors. I think the Celestial Toymaker as a story lends itself to colour particularly well. Kind of like Marco Polo. A lot of the sets and the costumes are very colourful, and it has some of the most interesting production design of any Doctor Who story from the 1960s. So if you were going to do one in colour, and there are other animations in colour as well, but if you're going to do any of them in colour, the Celestial Toymaker is one of the obvious first choices. I like to think of the colour version as another way to experience the story, even though the story is the same, and also the black and white version is just a colour version, but in black and white. And I assume the black and white one is also going to be cropped to 1.3:3 to match the format of the surviving episode, whereas the colour versions tend to be in widescreen. So it's another way to experience the story, even though the dialogue and the scenes and everything you're actually looking at are exactly the same. So you do get both, and no one is being deprived of either. And there is no fundamental difference between them. There's also, on disc 2, Sylvester McCoy's introduction to the final test that was on the Hartnell years cassette, which I think is a nice little gem so that something can still continue to be seen, although would it not make more sense being on disc 1? That you can watch Sylvester McCoy introducing the final test, and then you can actually watch the final test, whereas if it's on disc 2, then you would have to swap discs. It doesn't make much sense to me that it's on disc 2. Admittedly, it is a bonus feature, and there's already a lot on disc 1. You have the complete reanimation, and you also have the reconstructions, and you have the episode itself. There may not have been the space, or they may have just put it here because it's essentially a bonus feature, and they don't expect anyone to be that interested. It's more of something that they just wanted to retain, because this is a home video version of a story that mostly doesn't exist, and so they needed stuff to basically fill it out, and that is a good choice, I think. But I would have preferred it being on disc 1, but I'm not precious about it. There's also a photo gallery, which is a long tradition of the classic Doctor Who DVDs, but really the photo galleries most of the time just end up being images that you've already seen on the internet. It's fine that they're on there, but they're not something I ever really feel the need to look at because I've seen every image already. But still, it's not a bad thing that they're on there. And there's also PDF material, including camera scripts. This is also something that's a long tradition of the Doctor Who DVDs. I have to say though, as a screenwriting student, I really struggle to read the old camera scripts, because when I first got into screenwriting, it's actually because I was reading, and I went into this partly when I was talking about Doctor Who Confidential, when I was doing my episode ranking the top 10 episodes from series 3 and 4. And I explained that what got me into screenwriting was actually reading the scripts by Russell T Davies that were online, and how I learned the screenplay format from that, which is of course the standard now across the industry. But for a multi-camera as live production in a studio, the camera scripts back then were quite different because they're in 2 columns. Whereas now you just have the action and the dialogue, and then because it's single camera, you don't really need to describe what the camera movements should be and how the edit should go. But in the old camera scripts, it would be in 2 columns, and you'd have the action and the dialogue down one side, and then you'd usually have the camera script down the other side. And I still struggle to read those, but that's what fascinates me about them. One day I'm going to have to really commit to just watching an old Doctor Who story and then trying to follow along live with one of the camera scripts. Who knows, maybe I'll start with the Celestial Toymaker. But it'll be interesting to see, because I don't know if the camera scripts are the complete camera scripts or if it's just extracts. Because if it is the complete camera scripts, then will it still include the racial slur or not? Will they have thrown that in there as a historical document, or will they have decided to just skip that bit? I'll be interested to find out. But like I say, the camera scripts, I do find them a little bit difficult to understand, but I am going to try and do that eventually. And also, this only includes camera scripts. There's other PDF material as well, like old issues of Radio Times. Sometimes they're included. They haven't been specified as being part of that PDF material, but hopefully that's something that's going to be on there, because I just like reading old issues of magazines and seeing how things were covered at the time and stuff. And with these Blu-ray discs, including the PDFs, it's a way to digitize all of those things and to preserve them so that they don't get lost like these episodes have been. And I think that it's an important effort that's being made. But when it comes to the home video release of the Celestial Toymaker, the big talking point isn't any of that other stuff. What people seem to be talking about is the actual animation. And I have to say, I understand how it's turned into something so contentious. There's a documentary on Disc 2 about the making of the animation, and granted, so far we have only seen a 30-second trailer, and that really is just an announcement telling us that it's coming. There'll probably be a more substantial trailer at some point later, but on that 30-second trailer, and having not seen anything else, I mean, firstly, it isn't synchronized to the dialogue well. Hopefully, though, that's an issue of the trailer being edited, and it's not how it actually looks in the story, and that it's not actually that out of sync. Because if it is that out of sync, I just will not be able to follow it. It's important that it's in sync with the dialogue. Hopefully it will be, and I'm assuming that it will be, and I'm assuming that this is just an issue with the trailer, and that it's not actually going to look that jarring and just be that amateur. Also, the faces do look a bit weird, especially Peter Purvis and Jackie Lane. We don't really see much of them in the trailer, but there is that scene with the clown, and Stephen and Dodo are in that scene, and the way the faces look, they don't look like anything resembling a human being. Their faces just look odd, and I assume that's a stylistic choice for them to not look like an actual person and to look more stylized, but they just look too weird for me, and I don't know if I'll be able to look past it. Hopefully, because it is a trailer, then it's not going to be as jarring when I actually watch it. But all I can say is that when I watch the trailer and I see the way their faces look, it is a bit weird. And it does take me out of what I'm watching, and I can't stop thinking about it. Now, maybe by the time it comes out and we've seen more material, we'll have adapted to it and we'll be used to it. But I just don't want to be watching it and thinking, I can't focus because every time their faces come up on screen, I just keep thinking about how weird they are. It looks kind of like the driver game that Sumo Digital was going to make. That's the only comparison I can come up with. And that's a reference that will be lost on almost everyone except me. But the faces looking a bit weird and the dialogue being out of sync in the first trailer doesn't make for a great impact. I think as a first trailer, it hasn't exactly got me excited. Right now, I'm intrigued in the idea of them doing an animated reconstruction of this story. But what we've actually seen of that is not making me any more excited. I'm only really interested in the fact that this is being made and that this exists, not the actual specifics of it though. And that is something that I think that they really could have come out stronger. Instead of just showing us a little glimpse of it, they really should have just given us something that was more definitive and was going to make us more excited, instead of just showing us a little bit that could only have really revealed this is how the faces of the characters look and this is how out of sync the dialogue is in the trailer. That's all we've actually learned. We haven't learned anything in the trailer apart from the fact that the characters' faces look too strange and that the dialogue is out of sync, at least in the trailer. We've learned nothing else at all, apart from the fact that scenes seem to have been completely reinvented. Because usually the way it works is that an animated reconstruction will take the telesnaps and will take production stills and will use those as reference. Whereas the animation of the Celestial Toymaker appears to have just created entirely new ways of the scene looking and of what the sets look like. And it follows the surviving audio soundtrack, but everything else seems to be a complete reinvention. Because generally, the idea is that the animated reconstructions essentially are a stand-in for the original episodes. This isn't that. This is a reinterpretation, and like a novelization is a reinterpretation. I haven't actually read the novelization, although I do have it. I do have the Target novelization, which I haven't read yet. But the novelizations are also reinterpretations of the original story. The difference is, though, the original story isn't there. The idea behind the animated reconstructions is that they are essentially the next best thing. You get to watch the animations and realise this is pretty much how it would have looked at the time. We're going on the telesnaps, we're going on the production stills, and we're going to basically reconstruct the episode so that you can see, for all intents and purposes, how it would have looked probably. This is the next best thing to the actual episode. I don't know whether or not the way they've done this actually makes it the next best thing. Because, and this is the important question here, do the fans generally want to see the original story, or do they want to see someone else's idea for how to reinterpret it? Now, fandom is not a hive mind. It's easy to say this is what the fans want, when actually it's what you want, and you've decided that it's therefore what everybody else wants. But fans do have their own individual opinions. Yeah. That doesn't mean that there isn't a generally shared consensus on certain things. I don't think that the fans, generally speaking, want to see someone else's idea of how to reinterpret the story. Generally speaking, I think that we just want to see the original story as much as that's possible. Because the thing is, this is produced by BBC Studios. That's the commercial branch of the BBC. That makes this a commercial product. It can only exist if BBC Studios generates revenue. It's a business. It's not like the proper BBC, which is funded by the licence fee. This is the commercial branch of the BBC. They're selling a commercial product. When you're selling a commercial product, you have to consider, who is this for? Who's going to buy this? And surely, in the initial meetings about this, if someone had suggested actually not going on the telesnaps and production stills and trying to reconstruct the original episodes as much as that's possible, and instead completely reinventing scenes that are totally different from how they would have looked, with completely redesigned sets and things just going differently to how they would have been on screen, surely the response to that should have been, well, anyone who is actually interested in buying this and watching it is someone who is familiar with the original story anyway and wants to watch it. Because a casual viewer is not going to be interested in this. Why would they be? I can't imagine any casual viewer being interested in A, a classic Doctor Who DVD, and B, a classic Doctor Who DVD that is mostly animated, because most of the original story doesn't exist. I can only imagine an actual Doctor Who fan buying this. Anyone who's actually interested in this is someone who already knows the original story and has wanted to watch it, has watched the telesnaps, has seen the production stills, has heard the off-air soundtrack recordings, has read the novelizations, and wants to be able to watch the original story that comes from. And yet, they've decided instead to give those people something different, when they are the only target market that this has. I don't know if that's a very good business move for them. I think it's a sign that they don't understand their audience. And also, this means that there is actually no point in watching the final test with the animated missing episodes. There's no point watching the animation of the first 3 episodes and then the original version of the last episode, because there will be no consistency. Aesthetically, they'll look completely different because the sets are completely different. At least that's how it appears. I'm not aware of any of the original story resembling what we see in the trailer. That all seems to be just new stuff that they've created. Because with, for instance, The Evil of the Daleks, if I'm watching The Evil of the Daleks, then I'm going to watch all 6 episodes, but the surviving episode 2, I'm going to watch the original one of that and not the animation. That's how I like to watch these things. I'll sort of switch depending on what's available and what's not. They've misunderstood that, at least for fans like me, that's the way that we like to watch these. So instead of this being, for all intents and purposes, the original story with the missing episodes animated, instead it's just doing a completely new version of it, following just the surviving audio, and also, as a bonus, you get the surviving last episode so you can see how they compare. And because we don't really have any other way of releasing that last episode. I just don't think they've understood what the appeal of the animated reconstructions are amongst fandom. And the fandom is the only target market that this has. And I do wonder how many fans have actually been turned off by this. I'll certainly be interested to see. I do want to watch this, but just on the first trailer that they've released, I really don't know if this is going to work as well as they think it will. And I hope that it does. It could work. I know that. It could. But I am going to reserve judgment until I've actually seen it. This is just my initial impressions. And I am still going to watch it. Then I'm going to judge it. And when I start to watch it, I will check my preconceptions at the door. And hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised. But even if I'm not, then the telesnap reconstructions are still going to be included. So if I really don't like the way they've animated it, then I can always just watch the telesnap reconstructions with the surviving last episode. I can always do it that way. If I don't like the new version, I still have the old version. I'm not being deprived of anything. That original version will still exist. There's only one other thing that I have to talk about, which is the release. As has been noted, this is being released next year, after the Giggle, not before. And even though I would have liked to be able to watch this before the Giggle, animation should not be rushed. There was that report earlier this year about the working conditions that animators faced working on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That does tend to be quite common in animation, so if this is in order for them to take the time they need, then it's better than them rushing it out. And also, we don't know when work on this began. The last animated reconstruction to be released was The Abominable Snowmen, around I think it was October of last year. They could have started work on this straight after that, and if that's the case, then releasing it either before or to coincide with the Giggle would have been too impractical. There's no way of knowing when they did start work on it, but still, hopefully that's so that they can take the time they need, because the temptation to rush it out would have been there, like The Power of the Daleks. That was released to coincide with the 50th anniversary of that story, and the animation quality did decline over the course of each episode as they reached the deadline closer and closer, and so they just sort of rushed it a bit more. The fact that they're not doing that for this, that they're not so eager to take advantage of the Toymaker's return, means that they're taking the time they need, which is good. So that's the when it's being released, but I'm also interested in the where, because on the 1st of November, almost every episode of Doctor Who was added to BBC iPlayer. And they are basically going to be there indefinitely. And they've created a Doctor Who collection for all the Doctor Who programmes. It's essentially a Doctor Who streaming service that iPlayer is hosting as its own dedicated hub. But something I was surprised by is that the animated reconstructions of missing episodes are also on there as well. So far, not including the Celestial Toymaker, there are 13 stories that have been released on home video with missing episodes animated. And for all of them, their animated episodes are included in BBC iPlayer's Doctor Who collection, alongside all the other episodes, except for one, which is The Abominable Snowmen. That's the only story released to home video with animated reconstructions that has not also been put on the Doctor Who collection on BBC iPlayer. That's the only one that only has its single surviving episode available. The rest of them, all the animated missing episodes have gone onto iPlayer. But The Abominable Snowmen is the only one for which those animated missing episodes are exclusive to the home video release. And The Abominable Snowmen is also the most recent story to be released with animated missing episodes. I won't be surprised if the Celestial Toymaker doesn't go onto the Doctor Who collection, and that the only way of watching it is on the home video release. I wouldn't be surprised if the final test remains the only episode of that story that you can actually watch on iPlayer, and that for those other 3 episodes, then you have to watch them on the DVD or the Blu-ray or whatever, because it's a product of BBC Studios. It needs to generate revenue. It's a commercial product. It's not going to generate that revenue for them if they make it free on iPlayer. that's the same reason that it's not going to be broadcast on TV. Because this is something that has to make them money in a way that programmes produced by the BBC proper don't need to. Now, it may go straight to iPlayer, possibly, and the special features won't, so that's still an incentive to buy the DVD and Blu-ray, but I'm not expecting to see these episodes anywhere other than on the home video release. And I hope I'm wrong about that, but I don't think I am. Or it could be that it's simply because The Abominable Snowmen is the most recent one, and that once the Celestial Toymaker is released, then The Abominable Snowmen's animated missing episodes will be added to iPlayer, and that we'll have to wait until the next release of some animated missing episodes for the Celestial Toymaker's animated missing episodes to be added to iPlayer. Possibly. That might be the way they're doing it. Or it could be that The Abominable Snowmen is the only one of those 13 that is still making a profit for them. That everyone who's interested in the other 12 has already bought them, and that they're just no longer worth trying to sell. And so that they may as well put them on iPlayer. Maybe The Abominable Snowman is just the one that is still selling well enough to justify keeping it exclusive. Possibly. And if that's the case, then maybe both The Abominable Snowmen and the Celestial Toymaker will be put on iPlayer once their market value has been mostly expunged. Perhaps. But it will ultimately come down to what they decide to do as a business decision. We'll have to see. But I would like to see them on there eventually, simply because that's a big place for all Doctor Who episodes to coexist with each other in the same place for the first time ever. And I like the idea of all of them being there. So hopefully it will happen one day. But regardless, I'm still interested in actually buying this simply because there are going to be special features and I'm eager to see how well their reinterpretation of it works. I'm excited for the fact that there is going to be finally a home video release of the Celestial Toymaker with the missing episodes animated. The trailer hasn't won me over in terms of the way that they've animated it, but I'm still intrigued enough. I'm not turned off by it. I'm intrigued enough. So I'm going to watch it and I'm going to check my expectations and hopefully I'll be surprised. But that's coming out next year. We don't have an exact release date yet, but it'll be sometime next year. But anyway, the Toymaker will return in The Giggle, which makes its network premiere on BBC One today at 6:30, and viewers outside the British Isles will be able to stream it from that time on Disney+. Following this, it will be available to stream on BBC iPlayer as part of its Doctor Who collection. At the same time, an accompanying episode of Doctor Who Unleashed will premiere on BBC 3, and afterwards, my video ranking the top 10 episodes of Doctor Who Confidential's final 2 seasons will premiere on my channel. Happy 60th anniversary to Doctor Who.